After a celebratory dinner for my mother-in-law's 60th birthday, my husband called the waiter over and said loudly, "Please bring the check for me, my mom, and my sister. My wife will pay for herself." My mother-in-law and sister-in-law snickered with satisfaction. I calmly paid for my own meal with my card, but when we walked out to the parking lot, my husband and his mother froze in horror at what they found. Dear readers, before we continue, drop a comment with your name and what city you're reading from. Don't forget to leave a like. Enjoy the story. Friday evening was descending on Chicago slowly, reluctantly, as if the last rays of the cooling sun were clinging to the roofs of the downtown skyscrapers. Madeline Collins stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her 45th floor office in the Willis Tower, looking down at the bustling city. The cars, like colorful beetles, crawled through the gridlock on the Kennedy Expressway. People rushing home looked like tiny ants. She loved this view. It gave her a sense of control, a feeling of belonging to something vast and important. The workday was over, but Maddie was in no rush to leave. The hardest part of her day was still ahead. She put the finishing touches on a presentation for Alpha Investments, a key client whose account determined not only her annual bonus but her entire department's reputation. She took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of coffee and printer paper. The exhaustion buzzed pleasantly in her body, but her brain was still firing on all cylinders, analyzing slides, numbers, and key talking points. The phone on her desk vibrated, flashing an all-too-familiar name. Linda. Maddie's heart instinctively tightened. Phone calls from her mother-in-law never brought good news. They felt like being called to the chalkboard in school when you hadn't done your homework. You know in advance you're about to face humiliation and criticism, but there's no avoiding it. Maddie squeezed her eyes shut for a second, braced herself, and swiped the screen. "Yes, Linda. Good evening," she said, keeping her voice as even and calm as possible. "Maddie? Sweetie? Hello." The voice on the line was sickeningly sweet, like over-sugared jam. "I'm not interrupting, am I? Our little workaholic?" "I'm a bit busy," Maddie answered honestly, flipping through some documents. "I have a major presentation on Monday." "Oh, a presentation?" Her mother-in-law drawled dismissively. "You're always working, always focused on corporate matters, and you never have time to think about family. Do you know why I'm calling, dear? Tomorrow is my milestone birthday. 60 years. Can you imagine?" "Of course I remember, Linda. Andrew and I were planning to drop by on Sunday to celebrate. I even have your gift ready." "Sunday," the older woman mumbled with disappointment. "What kind of idea is Sunday?" "The birthday is tomorrow. And I was thinking, I don't want those boring house parties with potato salad and standing over a hot stove. My soul craves a real celebration. I booked a table for tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the Zenith." "Have you heard of it?" A cold sweat broke out on Maddie's neck. The Zenith wasn't just a restaurant. It was the trendiest, most snobbish establishment located right on the Gold Coast, overlooking Lake Michigan. The prices were astronomical, and getting a table usually required a month's notice. "Linda, that's an incredibly expensive restaurant," she started carefully. "And so sudden. Maybe we could pick something downtown, something a bit cozier?" "Cozy is for poor people, Maddie," her mother-in-law cut in, the sweetness in her voice replaced by a metallic edge. "I want to feel like a queen for once in my life. I've scrimped and saved my whole life. I raised my son alone. I gave him my last dime. Don't I deserve a single night of luxury?" Little Andrew already agreed. He was so happy. He said, "Mom, I only have one of you. Nothing is too good for you. And Katie will be there too." Maddie pictured the scene. Her mother-in-law, her sister-in-law Katie, and her husband Andrew in a luxury restaurant. And her, Maddie, playing the role of the walking wallet, because none of those three had the money for a place like that. Andrew, a talented freelance graphic designer, preferred flexible hours and artistic soul-searching over a steady paycheck. Katie, who had moved back in with her mother after a failed marriage, worked as a sales associate at a boutique and constantly complained about being broke. And Linda's pension barely covered her utility bills. "You wouldn't want to upset my boy on my milestone birthday, would you?" Linda's voice turned wheedling and pathetic again. "He wants to make me happy so badly." Maddie closed her eyes. She knew this trick. Guilt was Linda's primary weapon, and she wielded it like a virtuoso conductor. Any refusal, any pushback, instantly turned into a betrayal, a display of black ingratitude toward a woman who had sacrificed her life on the altar of motherhood. "Fine, Linda," she surrendered, feeling an unimaginable wave of exhaustion. "We'll all be there." "Now that's what I like to hear. Good girl," her mother-in-law chirped, instantly switching to a triumphant tone. "I knew you were reasonable. Dress nicely, so we aren't embarrassed to be seen with you. You're always walking around in those pantsuits like a man. See you tomorrow, kisses." The dial tone sounded like a death sentence. Maddie slowly put the phone down. The prospect of a quiet evening of work was replaced by a heavy sense of dread. Tomorrow's celebration promised to be yet another test of her nerves and her bank account. She looked back out at the city, the neon signs, the lights on the bridges over the Chicago River, the glowing apartment windows. Somewhere out there, in one of those apartments, waited her husband who had already agreed. The husband who, once again, put his mother's whims above the interests of their own family. And she, Maddie, had let it happen again. The drive home dragged on endlessly. The evening traffic seemed to absorb all the city's exhaustion and irritation, and Maddie felt that sticky atmosphere seeping into her car. She drove and thought about how imperceptibly her life had turned into a minefield, where every step had to be carefully calculated so she wouldn't be blown up by her mother-in-law's next manipulation. 3 years ago, when she married Andrew, she was sure she had found her safe harbor. He seemed reliable, calm, understanding. He spoke so beautifully about family values, about the importance of mutual support. And she, burned by her first marriage, believed him. She believed that his reverent attitude toward his mother was a sign of decency, not an infantile dependency. The first alarm bells rang just a few months after the wedding. First, Linda asked for a loan to tide her over until her pension check arrived. $500 for new winter boots. Maddie made the Zelle transfer without overthinking it. The debt, of course, was never repaid. Then money was needed to repair the porch on Linda's house. Then for treatments for a suddenly severe case of chronic bronchitis that apparently required exclusively expensive out-of-pocket medications. Every request came with the same mantra. "But we're family, Maddie. Who will help if not you? You have a good salary, not like us poor folks." Andrew always backed his mother. "What does it cost you, Maddie?" he would say, avoiding her gaze. "Mom is really struggling. You can see how sick she is." She parked her car in the underground garage of her condo building. The apartment, which she had bought before she even met Andrew, was her fortress. But with each passing year, that fortress felt more and more like besieged territory. Stepping off the elevator on her floor, she heard upbeat music coming from behind her door, and her husband's voice on the phone. "Yeah, Mom, of course we'll be there. Maddie will be thrilled. She loves surprises," he was chirping. Maddie put her key in the lock. The music abruptly stopped. When she walked in, Andrew was already standing in the hallway with a wide yet somehow guilty smile. "Oh, honey. You're home. I was just talking to Mom." "I heard," Maddie said dryly, taking off her heels. "I heard how thrilled I'm going to be at the prospect of spending half my paycheck on your mother's whim." "Come on, Maddie, don't start," he winced. "It's Mom's 60th. It only happens once in a lifetime. She just wants a beautiful celebration." "A beautiful celebration on my dime," she clarified, walking into the kitchen. "Andrew, we agreed we were saving for vacation. We wanted to go to Italy this summer. You were the one dying to see Rome. We'll go. We'll definitely go," he followed her like a lost puppy. "Maybe not Italy. Maybe Mexico. And not in the summer. Maybe in the fall. What's the difference? To you? Clearly none." Maddie took a bottle of water from the fridge and took a long sip. "Andrew, why couldn't you talk to me first? Why do you always present me with a done deal?" "Because I knew you'd start doing all this," he threw his hands up. "Counting pennies, talking about the budget." "Maddie, she's my mom. I can't say no to her. She raised me alone. She had sleepless nights. She did everything for me." Maddie sat at the kitchen island and tiredly rubbed her temples. She had heard this story hundreds of times. The tale of Linda's great sacrifice had become a family epic, passed from mouth to mouth, serving as the ultimate justification for her every demand. "She doesn't ask, Andrew. She demands, and she manipulates you using your sense of duty. Do you really not see that? I see that my mother is an older, sick woman who wants a little joy in her life, he replied stubbornly. And my wife, instead of supporting her, is throwing a fit over a restaurant. A restaurant? Maddie snapped, laughing humorlessly. Andrew, the average bill at the Zenith is like $250 a person. There are 4 of us. That's a grand minimum, not including drinks. And knowing your sister's appetite and your mother's love for the finer things, it'll be way more. Where are we getting that money? Well, he stammered. You have it in your account. You got that bonus last month. There it was. The magic words. You have it. She heard those words constantly. You have the money, you have the condo, you have the stable job. And he and his mother, just expected it. My bonus, Andrew, is earmarked to pay off the loan for your car, the one you totaled last year, she reminded him. And for bills, groceries, and that trip to Italy. Maddie, let's not fight. He stepped closer and tried to put his hands on her shoulders. Please, it's just one night. We'll sit, wish Mom a happy birthday, and that's it. I promise. This is the last time. You said the exact same thing when Katie needed money for a new iPhone, she reminded him, not yielding to his touch. And when your mom urgently needed a new 70-inch TV because her old one was showing a green tint. That's different. Nothing is different, Andrew. It's a system, and I am sick and tired of being the sponsor of this system. He backed away, a familiar, offended scowl appearing on his face. I don't understand why you hate my family so much. They aren't strangers to you. Because your family doesn't like me, Maddie said quietly but firmly. They don't see me as a wife or a daughter-in-law. They see me as a resource, an endless well they can draw from without ever giving anything back. And the saddest part is, you agree with them. She stood up and went to the bedroom. There was no point in arguing. He would just repeat the same things in circles. She would state facts. He would play the guilt card and preach filial duty. And eventually she would give in, because she loved him. Or thought she did. Now, standing in the middle of their bedroom, she wasn't so sure anymore. Love shouldn't feel like a constant battle for the right to have your own opinion and your own money. She opened the closet and started browsing through her dresses. She had to pick something for tomorrow, something that wouldn't make her embarrassing to be seen with. Ironically, she was never embarrassed by her clothes. She was embarrassed by her own husband. The next day, the atmosphere in the apartment was as tight as a bowstring. Since morning, Andrew tried to act like nothing happened. He made breakfast, brought Maddie coffee in bed, joked, and told little anecdotes, but his forced cheerfulness felt as fake as Christmas ornaments in July. Maddie answered in monosyllables, mentally preparing for the evening's ordeal. She spent almost the entire morning in front of her laptop, refining her presentation, trying to hide in the familiar world of numbers and charts from the impending family drama. Work had always been her salvation, her private territory, inaccessible to her mother-in-law's endless grievances and her husband's infantile submission. As evening approached and it was time to get ready, the tension peaked. Maddie pulled an elegant navy blue cocktail dress from the closet. Simple, but expensive. She had bought it for a corporate gala but had never worn it. Wow, Andrew whistled as he walked into the bedroom. Decided to knock everyone dead? I just want to look classy, she replied, zipping up the back. Mom will be thrilled, he nodded. She always says dark colors suit you. They make you look slimmer. Maddie went dead silent, though inside she was boiling. Even a compliment from her husband had to be filtered through his mother's approval. Not you look stunning, but Mom will approve. She walked over to the vanity and started doing her makeup. Every movement was measured and precise. She was painting on a mask of calm and confidence to hide her exhaustion and irritation. The Zenith welcomed them with blinding ambient lighting and soft enveloping jazz. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the lake, shrouded in evening mist. They were already waiting at the entrance. Linda, decked out in a garish sequin dress that made her look like a disco ball, rushed to hug her son. My Andrew, my sweet boy, finally. She cooed, completely ignoring Maddie. Katie and I couldn't wait any longer. Katie stood next to her. Her face wore a mix of boredom and excitement. She looked Maddie up and down critically, her eyes stopping on her purse. Ooh, what a beauty, she drawled, pointing at the clutch. New? Probably costs as much as I make in a month. Katie, Don't be tacky. Her mother scolded her, though the same greedy spark flashed in her eyes. Let's go in. Our table is waiting. They were seated at the best table in the house, right by the glass. Crisp white linens, crystal glasses, polished silver. Maddie sat where directed, feeling deeply uncomfortable under the crossfire of her mother-in-law's and sister-in-law's stares. So, let the celebration begin, Linda announced grandly, picking up the massive leather-bound menu. Tonight, I want to try the absolute best of everything. I've earned it. The waiter, a young man with impeccable posture, approached the table. Good evening. What can I get you started with? For starters, Linda put on her reading glasses and ran her finger down the lines. The tuna tartare, the dry-aged beef carpaccio, the foie gras. Yes, a portion of foie gras for everyone. And oysters. A dozen. No, make it 2 dozen. If we're going to celebrate, let's do it right. Mom, maybe we should ask what everyone actually wants first? Andrew chimed in cautiously. Son, don't argue with your mother. She waved him off. I know best what we need. It's my treat. That last sentence was exceptionally comical. Maddie shot her husband a quick look, but he was diligently studying the pattern on the tablecloth. And for the main course, Linda continued her commanding streak. I'll have the filet mignon. Katie, what about you? The bone-in ribeye for me, Katie answered without hesitation. The largest cut, and the truffle butter on top. Andrew, the lamb rack for you? As usual, his mother decided for him. And you, Maddie, what will you eat? I'll just have the seafood salad, Maddie said, trying to keep her cool. Just a salad? Her mother-in-law looked genuinely surprised. Are you on a diet? At your age, it doesn't matter anyway, sweetie. You should have worried about that earlier. Don't be shy. Order something substantial. The lobster, for example. No, thank you. I'm not very hungry. The salad is fine. Suit yourself, Linda shrugged, turning back to the waiter. And to drink, a bottle of Dom Perignon. And for the gentleman, cognac. What's the most expensive one you have? The waiter politely cleared his throat. We carry Louis XIII de Rémy Martin, ma'am. Wonderful. Bring that. Maddie mentally calculated the order. The bill was already crossing a couple of $1,000s. She felt a cold fury rising within her. This wasn't just dinner. It was a demonstration of her financial capacity and their perceived right to dispose of it. When the drinks arrived, Linda raised her glass. To me, to my beauty, wisdom, and boundless life energy, she declared. And to my wonderful children, who love and value me so much. She took a dramatic pause and looked straight at Maddie. And to our daughter-in-law, of course, who helps us live, rather than just exist. Katie and Andrew dutifully raised their glasses. Maddie took hers too, but didn't drink. She stared at the dancing bubbles in the champagne, thinking that this was probably the most expensive and most humiliating dinner of her life. The party was just starting, and she already felt entirely drained of energy. When the appetizers hit the table, Linda and Katie attacked them with the enthusiasm of people who hadn't seen upscale food in years. They loudly commented on every dish, comparing the oysters to the ones they had last year in Miami, a trip Maddie had also funded under the guise of improving Mom's health. They complained about how rarely they got to let loose like this. Andrew ate in silence, occasionally shooting his wife guilty looks, but making absolutely no effort to curb his mother's and sister's appetites. Maddie picked at her salad, barely tasting it. All her thoughts were focused on the impending check and how she was going to get out of this. Maddie, why so gloomy? Her mother-in-law asked with faux concern, putting a tiny spoon of caviar into her mouth. Don't like the food? Or the company? I'm just tired, Linda. It was a long week at work. Ah. Work. There was that dismissive tone again. At your age, I was working double shifts at the factory, raising kids, keeping the house spotless. And I never complained. But you young people today are so fragile. The slightest thing and you're exhausted. Times change, Maddie replied evenly. The demands are different now. The pace of life is different. Pace of life, right? Katie snorted, washing down her tartare with champagne. You sit in a heated office. You type on a keyboard. You're not hauling cement. I'm on my feet all day dealing with nasty customers. Now that is real work. Maddie ignored the jab. Arguing with Katie was pointless. Katie had always believed her retail job was vastly harder and more important than Maddie's corporate paper pushing. even though her sister-in-law's salary was 5 times lower. Speaking of work, Linda perked up. Andrew mentioned they gave you a nice bonus. Good girl. Keep it up. Everything goes to the family, to the shared pot. Actually, I was planning to spend that money on Maddie started, but was immediately cut off. Well, like I said, good girl. Her mother-in-law beamed. Because Katie and I just had our winter boots fall apart, and they say it's going to be a brutal winter in Chicago this year. And your Andrew could use a wardrobe refresh too. He walks around in the same things constantly. Maddie looked at her husband, expecting some support, but he just leaned closer to his plate, pretending to be intensely absorbed in eating his lamb. A betrayal. Quiet, silent, but no less painful. He was allowing his mother and sister, once again, to manage her money, her life. Andrew and I will decide for ourselves how to manage our family budget, Maddie stated firmly, feeling her hands go icy. Yours? Linda raised an eyebrow in feigned surprise. Sweetie, what shared budget do you have when essentially only one person works in this family? Our Andrew has an artistic soul. He can't be bogged down by the mundane grind. He is a creator, and a creator needs a muse and financial support. You should be happy you can provide that for him. That was it. That was the line. Maddie felt a hot wave of anger surge up her throat. Andrew is a grown man, not an exotic houseplant that needs watering and fertilizing, she said, looking straight into her mother-in-law's eyes. He is fully capable of earning his own living. How dare you? Linda flared up. You're throwing it in my son's face that he… Mom, Maddie, please, let's stop. Andrew finally spoke up. Today is a celebration. Let's just enjoy the evening. Oh, I am enjoying it. His mother demonstratively grabbed her glass. It's just that some people don't know how to enjoy life and are always finding something to complain about. Silence fell for a while. The waiter brought the main courses. The aromas of seared meat, spices, and truffle oil filled the air. Katie looked at her massive steak in awe. Now this is what I'm talking about. This is living, she declared. Not like our frozen dinners from Walmart. Maddie, are you sure you don't want to order one? Look at this beauty. You look like an orphan sitting there with that lettuce. Thanks, Katie. I'm full. Your loss. You only live once. You gotta take everything you can get, especially when someone else is paying, she giggled, looking pointedly at Maddie. Maddie felt the very last drop of her patience evaporate. She couldn't and wouldn't play this game anymore. She took her phone out of her purse and texted her best friend, Sylvia. Sylvia. Hey. At the MIL's birthday dinner. Think there's going to be a divorce tonight. Can you back me up if things go south? The reply came almost instantly. Hang in there, babe. Keep your phone close. Call me anytime. I'll come drag you out of that snake pit. The short text gave her strength. She wasn't alone. She had backup. Waiter! Linda yelled loudly. Bring us another round of champagne and cognac. And bring us every dessert you have on the menu. We are doing a tasting. Andrew tried to protest mildly, but his mother incinerated him with a glare. Don't ruin my birthday, son. She hissed. Your wife might be a cheapskate, but you should know that skimping on your mother is the ultimate sin. Maddie watched the scene in silence. She was no longer a participant. She was a spectator. A spectator who already knew how this pathetic play was going to end, and she was ready for the finale. The desserts the waiter brought looked like works of art. Chocolate spheres that melted to reveal fresh berries when hot fudge was poured over them, fluffy mousses in delicate coupes, miniature cakes decorated with edible gold leaf. Linda and Katie snapped photos of every dessert with their phones, commenting loudly and posting them to Instagram with captions like, Living large, this is how you celebrate milestones. Maddie imagined how their mutual acquaintances would see those photos and what they would think. They'd probably assume everything was picture perfect in their family, that a caring son and daughter-in-law threw a lavish party for mom. No one would even guess the dirty game being played at this table. Maddie, why aren't you eating dessert? Her mother-in-law pushed a plate of tiramisu toward her. Afraid of ruining your figure? Probably smart. At your age, every extra pound is a tragedy. Hard to work off. Look at me, 60 years old and slender as a birch tree. Maddie looked at her mother-in-law's spread-out figure, squeezed into the shiny dress, and barely suppressed a smirk. No thanks. I don't want anything sweet. Well, I do, Katie chimed in, finishing her third pastry. And I'm in the mood for something else, too. Maddie, listen. My birthday is coming up. I have my eye on this specific designer bag. It's actually on sale right now. Only $2,000. You wouldn't say no to your husband's sister over a little thing like that, right? Katie, I don't have that kind of money for gifts, Maddie replied evenly. Oh, come on, her sister-in-law pressed. With your salary? You're gonna be stingy with family? Andrew, tell her. Andrew, who was already heavily buzzed from the cognac, swept a glassy gaze over the table. Maddie, come on. Katie is my sister, he slurred. We gotta help her out. I am not a bank for you, Katie, nor am I a charity, Maddie cut in. You want a Gucci bag? Earn the money yourself. Wow, Katie yelled, her face twisting in anger. I knew you were greedy and heartless. You only think about yourself. You walked right into our family and got everything handed to you. You moved right into Andrew's apartment and… Hold on a second, Maddie interrupted her. First of all, it's my apartment, bought with my own money long before I ever met your brother. And secondly, I never asked anyone to walk into my life and climb onto my back. A ringing silence fell over the table. Even Linda lost her voice for a moment. She stared at her daughter-in-law with undisguised hatred. Oh, so that's how it is, she finally spat out. You've shown your true colors. Keeping score, counting pennies. While we fools thought you were family. Family doesn't act like this. Linda, Maddie said, feeling a cold determination rising within her. Family doesn't try to live at someone else's expense. They don't humiliate or use each other. And what would you know about family bonds? Her mother-in-law exploded. You didn't even have a normal family. A public school teacher and a city engineer. Just middle-class nobodies. What do you know about true bonds? True support? My parents, unlike you, taught me self-respect and respect for others, Maddie answered. And they taught me not to let anyone wipe their feet on me. She knew she was crossing the line, that after these words there would be no turning back, but she didn't care. The cup had overflowed. Years of humiliation, suppressing emotions, being financially milked. It all spilled out on this one night, in this one conversation. Andrew, Linda shrieked, turning to her son. Do you hear how she's insulting your mother? Are you just going to sit there? Are you a man or a doormat? Andrew looked helplessly at his mother, then at his wife. He was drunk, and his brain was clearly failing to process the situation. Mom, Maddie, please. Let's stop. He mumbled. Let's stop. His mother mocked him. So you're allowing this? This corporate climber to speak to me like this? Me, a woman who dedicated her whole life to you, having to listen to insults from someone like her? I wasn't insulting you, Maddie interjected. I was just stating facts. Facts? Linda pushed herself up from the table, her face covered in red blotches. I'll show you facts. She grabbed her half-empty champagne flute from the table and drew her arm back to throw it at her. Maddie instinctively flinched away. Andrew jumped up and intercepted his mother's arm. Mom, stop! What are you doing? Let me go, she struggled. I'll teach this cow some respect for her elders. A few guests at neighboring tables turned around curiously at the noise. The waiter standing nearby tensed up, ready to intervene. Mom, sit down, Andrew yelled, wrestling the glass out of her hand. Stop embarrassing us! Linda, breathing heavily, collapsed back into her chair. She burned Maddie with a look of pure fury. You'll pay for this, she hissed. I'll make sure you regret today. Maddie silently pulled a $50 bill from her purse and laid it on the table. This covers my salad and water, she said. Keep the change. As for the rest of it, I guess you'll have to pay yourselves. She stood up, grabbed her clutch, and headed toward the exit. Where are you going? Andrew yelled after her. Home, she replied without turning around. This circus is over, at least for me. She walked through the dining room, feeling the curious stares on her, but she couldn't have cared less. Inside, she felt a ringing emptiness, but simultaneously a strange sense of relief, as if she had just dropped heavy chains that had bound her for years. She knew this night was the turning point, and that her life would never be the same again. Stepping out into the cool evening air, Maddie took a deep, almost convulsive breath. Her head was spinning, whether from the champagne on an empty stomach or the massive nervous tension. She leaned against a pillar near the valet stand and closed her eyes, trying to stop her hands from shaking. The silence was broken by the sound of the restaurant doors opening, It was Andrew. Maddie, wait! He ran up to her and grabbed her elbow. You can't just leave. Why can't I? She opened her eyes and looked at her husband. His face was lost and terrified. You heard her. Your mother threatened me. I'm not waiting around for her to move from words to actions. She didn't mean it. She was just emotional. You provoked her. I provoked her. Maddie shook her head in disbelief. Andrew, do you even hear yourself? I provoked her by refusing to buy your sister a $2,000 purse. Or by not wanting all of you to live off my paycheck? Well, you could have said it more gently, he mumbled. You didn't have to be so harsh. Harsh? I have been gentle for 3 years, Andrew. For 3 years, I've been understanding, patient, compliant. And where did it get me? It got your family walking all over me. I'm done. She firmly detached his hand from her arm. I'm leaving. I'm calling an Uber and going home. But what about us? What about the bill? Panic crept into his voice. The bill? She smiled bitterly. I think that's your problem now. You guys wanted a beautiful celebration, so pay for it. But we don't have that kind of money. Maddie, you know that. You have it. She looked him straight in the eyes. And that is exactly why I want nothing to do with you anymore. She pulled out her phone to request an Uber, but Andrew grabbed her hand again. I'm begging you. Come back. His voice shook. Please, Maddie, don't embarrass me in front of Mom. Let's go back inside. You pay the check, and we'll talk everything out calmly at home. I promise I'll talk to her. Maddie looked at him, two conflicting emotions battling in her soul. A residual pity for this weak, lost man and icy contempt. Even now, after everything, he wasn't thinking about her. He wasn't thinking about their marriage. He was thinking about saving face in front of his mom. In that exact moment, something permanently snapped inside her. The last thread tying her to him broke. No, Andrew, she said quietly but firmly. No later. No talking it out at home. Everything gets resolved here and now. Behind his back, she saw Linda and Katie walking out of the restaurant. They had forced themselves to come after them. Aha, there you are, you little scammer. Her mother-in-law hissed as she approached. Decided to run out on the check? I paid for my order, Maddie replied calmly. For your little salad, Katie laughed. And who's going to pay for the lobster, the caviar, and the French champagne? Santa Claus? Maddie stayed silent. She just stood there looking at them, this trio united by greed and immaturity. And suddenly, she felt incredibly light, as if she were looking at total strangers, people she didn't even know. You know what? She said. New, unfamiliar notes ringing in her voice. Let's go back inside. You're right. It's rude to leave a party unfinished. Andrew's face lit up. Linda and Katie exchanged triumphant glances. They were certain they had broken her, that she had caved again. They returned to the table. Maddie sat in her seat, picked up her water glass, and took a sip. I changed my mind, she announced, sweeping a calm gaze over them. Tonight is Linda's milestone birthday, and she deserves a real celebration. So, let's continue. Her mother-in-law and sister-in-law couldn't hide their triumph. Andrew sighed with relief. Excuse me, waiter, Maddie called out. The young man instantly appeared at their table. Yes, ma'am? Please bring us the check, she said. But we aren't finished, Linda protested indignantly. I still wanted dessert and coffee. The check first, Maddie repeated. We need to handle this formality. The waiter shrugged, walked away, and returned a minute later with a leather check presenter. He placed it in the middle of the table and stepped back. All eyes went to the leather book. Andrew hesitantly reached out, opened it, looked at the final total, and went pale. How much is it? Katie asked impatiently. Andrew silently handed her the check. $4,850, she read aloud, her voice trembling. Oh my God. Silence fell. Everyone looked at Maddie. She sat calmly, sipping her water. Well, Linda broke the silence. Who's paying? What do you mean who? Maddie feigned surprise. Whoever ordered the banquet. Meaning you? Katie clarified. No. Maddie smiled. I only ordered a salad, and I already paid for it. But you said you came back to pay. Andrew stammered, stuttering. I said we came back to handle a formality, Maddie corrected him. And here we are, handling it. And then she did something no one expected. She called the waiter over again. Excuse me, she said, loud and clear enough for neighboring tables to hear. We have a slight misunderstanding regarding the payment. Could you please split this check? The waiter, confused, looked at her, then at the rest of them. Split it? Equally? Andrew asked hopefully. No, Maddie shook her head. Not equally. Please bring a separate check for me, she pointed to herself, and a separate one for them. She gestured toward Andrew, his mother, and his sister. These three are one party. They are my husband's guests. I am here by myself tonight. Andrew shot up from his chair. He was as white as a sheet. Maddie, what are you doing? What I should have done a long time ago, she answered. Setting boundaries. And in that exact moment, while her mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked at her with horror and hatred, and her husband with despair and confusion, the waiter returned with 2 receipts. He placed one small one in front of Maddie, and an imposing one in front of Andrew. Here you are, he said. And that was when Andrew uttered his fatal sentence, the one that became the point of no return. He looked at the waiter and said loudly, for the whole room to hear, Yes, that's correct. Please bring the check for me, my mom, and my sister. My wife will pay for herself. Linda and Katie snickered. They won. Or so they thought. Maddie calmly took her credit card out, placed it in the small presenter with her receipt, and handed it to the waiter. Here you go. And please, make sure to add a 20% tip for yourself. She smiled, but it was a completely different kind of smile. After paying her modest portion of the bill, Maddie slowly stood up from the table. 3 pairs of eyes were fixed on her, the triumphantly contemptuous glares of her in-laws, and the lost, guilty stare of her husband. They expected her to throw a tantrum, to cry, to beg, but she just smoothed out her dress, picked up her clutch, and said, Relax, I just need to use the restroom. She headed toward the exit of the dining room, feeling their eyes on her back. Every step was difficult, as if walking through thick sand. Her legs felt like jelly, and there was a rushing sound in her ears. When she reached the women's restroom, she pushed the heavy door open, and only when she was alone did she lean against the cool, tiled wall so she wouldn't collapse. The mirror across from her reflected a pale face with dark circles under the eyes and feverishly bright pupils. That was her, Madeline Collins, a successful corporate manager, a smart, strong woman. And that same woman had just been publicly humiliated by the person closest to her. My wife will pay for herself. Those words, spoken loudly across the whole restaurant, echoed in her head like a funeral march. A funeral march for her marriage, her hopes, the 3 years of her life given to this man. She walked over to the sink and splashed freezing water on her face. The water brought her back to her senses a bit. She looked at her reflection and didn't recognize herself. Who is this woman? Is this really the same Maddie who always knew her worth, who never let anyone degrade her? How did it come to this? Memories washed over her in a wave. Here she is, 2 years ago, canceling a long-awaited trip to Paris because Linda's blood pressure suddenly spiked. Andrew had said, Maddie, you understand. Mom is alone. She's scared. And she understood. Canceled the trip. And lost the money on non-refundable tickets. Here she is, a year ago, taking out a personal loan to pay for emergency surgery for Katie. Later it turned out it wasn't life-saving at all, just the nose job her sister-in-law had always dreamed of. Andrew had said, well, she's a woman, she wants to be pretty, we're family, we have to help each other. And she paid off that loan by cutting her own expenses. Here she is, 6 months ago, selling her older but beloved car to chip in for Andrew's new one. He had totaled his SUV in an accident while not entirely sober. Maddie, you barely drive anyway, and I need status for meeting clients, he had argued. And she sold it. Every single time she gave in, forgave them, put herself in their shoes, justified his weakness as love, and his dependency on his mother as filial duty. She built illusions, created an image of a perfect family, closing her eyes to the fact that in this family, she was simply being used. Today, that illusion shattered, breaking into a million tiny pieces like a crystal glass. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the water. But they weren't tears of self-pity. They were tears of fury. Fury at him, at his mother, his sister, and most of all, at herself. At herself for her blindness, her patience, her stupid hope that he would change. She pulled her phone out of her clutch, Her fingers were shaking slightly, but she forced them to obey. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to make a scene. She was going to do what she should have done a long time ago. She was going to put a hard final stop to this. She found the number for a towing company in her contacts, one she had used a while back when her old car broke down on the highway. "Citywide Towing, how can I help you?" a brisk male voice answered. "Hi," Maddie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need your help. I need a car towed." "No problem." "Address?" She gave the address of the Zenith. "The car is in the parking lot." A white BMW X3. License plate. She rattled off the plate number she knew by heart. "Do you have the registration for the vehicle on you?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes," Maddie answered. "Digital registration in my Apple Wallet." "The car is registered to me, Madeline Collins." "Great. Where are we taking it?" "To the nearest dealership or a secure impound lot in the city, I don't care. The important thing is that it disappears from here." "Understood. The flatbed will be there in about 40 minutes. You can pay by card over the phone or—" "I'll pay for everything right now," she interrupted him. "Just please do it quickly and quietly." "You got it." Hanging up, Maddie felt a strange, almost diabolical satisfaction. The car was bought during the marriage, but at Maddie's explicit demand, the title and registration were exclusively in her name. She had the high income, and the bank approved the auto loan solely for her. Andrew hadn't objected back then. He didn't care whose name was on the paperwork, as long as he got to drive around in a prestige SUV. He didn't even care about the details. And now, that detail was becoming crucial. She looked in the mirror again. The tears were gone. A different woman looked back at her. Calm. Decisive. With a cold glint in her eyes. She touched up her makeup, squared her shoulders, and walked out of the restroom. When she returned to the table, the party was in full swing. Linda and Katie, certain of their total victory, had ordered another glass of the most expensive wine and were loudly discussing how they had put that nouveau riche in her place. Andrew sat in silence, staring at his plate. He looked up when Maddie sat down. In his gaze, she could read a mix of guilt and hope. He clearly thought she had cooled off and was ready to make peace. "Is everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Now it is," Maddie answered, smiling enigmatically. "Now everything is going to be perfectly fine." She took out her phone and sent one more text to Sylvia. "Plan B activated. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. Looks like I'm finally going to be free." She took a sip of water and leaned back in her chair. She didn't need to rush anywhere anymore. She was ready to savor the finale of this show. Time dragged on mercilessly. Maddie sat at the table like she was on hot coals, but outwardly she maintained an icy calm. She answered her husband's rare questions in monosyllables. She ignored the malicious jabs from her mother-in-law and sister-in-law, checking the time on her phone every few minutes. The 40 minutes promised by the dispatcher felt like an eternity. She expected one of them to suggest leaving at any second, which would ruin her plan. But to her amazement, the party clearly wasn't in a hurry. Linda and Katie, drunk on their own triumph, kept ordering more desserts, prolonging the pleasure, and evidently padding the already astronomical bill. Andrew sat slumped, barely participating in the conversation, only occasionally shooting his wife pleading looks. "Well, Andrew?" Linda said loudly. "Maybe we should settle up and head home? Our little Maddie is looking a bit sad." Probably doing the math in her head on how much we've eaten. She and Katie burst out laughing again. "Yeah, Mom, it's time," Andrew eagerly agreed. He clearly wanted this humiliating evening to end as quickly as possible. He called the waiter over. "We'll take the check." "Your check has already been issued and partially paid," the young man replied politely. "What do you mean, partially paid?" Andrew was confused. "Your wife settled her portion, and the rest." The waiter hesitated. "You'll have to settle the rest with the manager up front." "But we want to pay here right now," Linda interjected. "I apologize, but our mobile terminal is down. You'll have to step up to the hostess stand." Maddie smiled inwardly. Of course. She had planned for everything. She didn't want them paying by card at the table, because that would only take a moment. She needed to buy time to make sure the tow truck was definitely gone. While paying for her salad, she had quietly slipped the waiter a $100 bill and asked him to direct her party to the front to pay, claiming the handheld system was broken. The staff gladly obliged. "Well, let's go," she said, standing up. "Let's see how your finances are looking." They headed toward the exit, There was a small line at the manager's desk. Maddie stood at the very back, letting her husband and his relatives go first. Andrew shifted nervously from foot to foot. "Maddie, maybe you could just—" He started whispering. "No," she cut him off, also in a whisper. "That's your bill. You pay it. But I don't have that kind of money in my checking account." "Amazing," Maddie shrugged. "And when you were ordering caviar and Louis XIII cognac, you weren't thinking about that? I thought you. You thought I would pay for everything, like always," she finished for him. "You were wrong, Andrew." They reached the register. Andrew handed the manager his debit card. The woman swiped it. The machine let out a long warning beep. Declined. "Insufficient funds," she announced. Andrew turned red. "Try this one." He handed over a credit card. The result was the same. "I don't have any others," he muttered, dropping his hands. "Perhaps the ladies can help?" The manager looked questioningly at Linda and Katie. "Us?" The mother-in-law acted outraged. "We are a pensioner and a minimum wage worker. Where would we get that kind of money? In that case, I will have to call security and the police," the employee said coldly. At that moment, Maddie's phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Vehicle has been towed to the secure lot. Thank you for your business." Maddie smiled. "It was time. There's no need for security," she said loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "I'm sure my husband will figure something out. For example, he could leave his ID or his watch as collateral." "It's a very expensive watch, isn't it, honey?" She looked sarcastically at the watch on his wrist, the one she had bought him for his birthday. Andrew looked at her in horror. He realized she wasn't joking. "Maddie, I'm begging you. What are you doing? Begging me?" She stepped in close to him. "You humiliated me in front of an entire restaurant. You let your mother and sister insult me. You betrayed me. And now you're asking for help?" She turned to the manager. "I'm sure these people will come up with a solution. And I, with your permission, will be leaving." She turned on her heel and marched decisively toward the door. "Stop!" Andrew yelled after her. "You can't leave us here. We all came in one car." Maddie stopped right at the doorway, turned around, and flashed him her most charming smile. "Oh, don't worry about the car," she said. "It's not there anymore." "What do you mean it's not there?" Linda didn't understand. "Just that." Maddie spread her arms. "While you all were feasting, I called a tow truck. Your carriage, so to speak, has turned back into a pumpkin." The sheer astonishment and shock on their faces was so authentic, she couldn't suppress a laugh. "But how?" Andrew stammered. "Because the car is registered to me, dear husband," she reminded him. "And as the legal owner, I have every right to do what I want with my property." She pushed the door open. "Have a great night, and good luck with the bill." She stepped out onto the street, Linda's indignant scream echoing behind her. Maddie didn't listen. She walked briskly down the pathway leading to the main road. Her phone buzzed again. It was Sylvia. "Well, babe? Operation Payback a success?" Her friend's cheerful voice rang out. "More than you know," Maddie laughed. "You should have seen their faces." "I can imagine. You're my hero. Where are you headed now?" "Home. I ordered an Uber. It's pulling up now. I just want to take a bath and go to sleep." "Good call. And tomorrow we file for divorce and asset division." "The car is yours, the condo is yours," Sylvia said. "There isn't really much else to split, unless you want his PlayStation game collection." "Let's not drag this out. That guy isn't worth your time." "I know," Maddie sighed. "Now I know that for sure." She saw the approaching car and waved to the driver. "All right, Sylvia. Thanks for having my back. I'll call you tomorrow. Hang in there." She got into the car, confirmed her address in Chicago, and sank back into the seat. The driver, a middle-aged man, shot her a curious look in the rearview mirror. "Coming from the Zenith?" he asked. "Celebrating something?" "Yes," Maddie nodded. "Independence Day." She stared out the window at the passing streetlights, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt truly free. As the taxi carried her further away from the lakefront and into the city, Maddie pulled out her phone. Her finger hovered for a moment over the contact husband. She had the urge to call, to scream out everything that had built up over the years, to listen to his pathetic excuses, but she held back. Right now, any conversation was pointless. Let the emotions settle, and then they could talk calmly, coldly, through a lawyer. Instead, She opened her banking app. In their joint savings account, where they occasionally deposited small amounts, there was a little over $5,000. It was their shared money. She corrected herself mentally. Without hesitation, she transferred the entire amount to her personal checking account. She remembered how last month she had put $2,500 of her bonus in there, while Andrew had chipped in a measly $200. If we're separating, she thought with a bitter smile. Next, she opened a folder on her phone. Auto registration, owner, Madeline Collins. Insurance policy. Her name. Bill of sale. Her signature. Everything lined up. From a legal standpoint, she was untouchable. She leaned her head against the headrest and closed her eyes. Her thoughts were spinning. Over and over, she replayed the scene at the restaurant, his words, his mother's and sister's laughter, and finally, her own calm demeanor, which had surprised her the most. Where did it come from? What happened to the Maddie who used to cry after every fight, who would stress for weeks over a dirty look from her mother-in-law? It was probably a defense mechanism. Or maybe she had just hit her limit. Everyone has a breaking point, a boiling point. Her boiling point was, tonight. The taxi stopped in front of her high-rise. Maddie thanked the driver, stepped out, and took a deep breath of the night air. It smelled like asphalt, the city, and an approaching storm. Her home, her fortress. She took the elevator up to her floor, unlocked the door, and walked into a quiet, empty apartment. Only now, when she was safe, did she allow herself to relax. She went to the kitchen, poured a glass of cold water, and downed it in one go. What next? The question hung in the air. Divorce, obviously, but how would it play out? Would Andrew fight? Try to get something in court? Would Linda make a scene? Show up at her job? File complaints? Knowing that family, anything was possible. Maddie grabbed her phone again and dialed Sylvia. "Hey, it's me again," she said when her friend answered. "Sorry it's so late. I have a legal question." "Shoot," Sylvia replied. Consultations for the heroine of the day are free of charge. Maddie briefly described the situation with the condo and the car. Right. Sylvia paused for a moment. The condo was purchased before the marriage, so there's no debate there. It belongs to your separate property. Period. The car was bought after the wedding, which means it falls into marital property, even if you're the sole owner on paper. Under Illinois law, assets acquired during the marriage are subject to equitable distribution. So he can demand half its value? A cold sweat broke over Maddie. Theoretically, yes. But Sylvia trailed off. Who made the payments on that loan? Mostly me. I have all the bank statements showing the transfers came from my paycheck. Perfect. That's our ace in the hole. We'll prove in court that you bore the primary financial burden and argue for an unequal division of that asset. Does he even have a steady income? Not really. He's a freelancer. He gets paid sporadically. Even better. We'll be able to prove that he wouldn't even be able to buy you out of your half if the car went to him. The judge will almost certainly award the car to you with an obligation to pay him a small buyout, but we'll knock that number down to the bare minimum by showing proof of your exclusive payments. And what if he tries to file a police report against me for auto theft or something? Grand theft auto? Nonsense, Sylvia snorted. You're a co-owner of the marital estate. And on paper, you're the sole owner. You had every right to move your property to a secure location. We'll say you thought the alarm was malfunctioning and you didn't want to disrupt dinner. No one can prove malicious intent in court, so sleep easy. You played this masterfully. Thanks, Sylvia. You've calmed me down. Anytime. First thing tomorrow morning, I'll draft the divorce papers. Oh, and one more thing, she added. Change the locks. First thing, in the morning. Who knows what they're capable of? The conversation with her friend put everything in order in Maddie's head. She felt more confident. She had a plan, and she had support. She went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and looked at Andrew's shelves. His t-shirts, sweaters, jeans. It all seemed so foreign now, like the belongings of a random roommate. She grabbed a large duffel bag and methodically, completely devoid of emotion, started packing his clothes. Then she moved to the bathroom. His toothbrush, razor, shaving cream, Everything went into the same bag. She worked fast and efficiently, like a surgeon in an operating room, cutting out the dead tissue and severing what tied her to her past life. When the bag was stuffed to the brim, she placed it in the hallway by the front door. Then she grabbed a trash bag and walked through the apartment, collecting all traces of his presence. The magazines he read, the half-empty coffee mug on his desk, his favorite slippers. She wanted to purge her space and her life of him. After finishing, she sat on the couch and scanned the living room. It felt somehow more spacious, brighter, as if not just a person had left the apartment, but something suffocating. She knew a difficult time lay ahead, the divorce, the property division, inevitable clashes with his family. But she also knew she would handle it because today she had regained the most important thing, herself. The night was restless. Maddie woke up at the slightest rustle. She kept thinking she heard a key turning in the lock, that Andrew had come back. But the apartment was quiet. Toward dawn, she finally fell asleep and had a strange dream. She was driving her car down an endless highway, and Linda was sitting in the passenger seat knitting a long, endlessly long scarf that wrapped around Maddie, keeping her from steering. She woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. The first thing she did was call a locksmith to change the locks. Then she called Sylvia. "I've decided," she said. "I'm filing for divorce today." "Good call," the lawyer supported her. "I already have a draft of a no-fault petition ready. But we can file for fault if you want to wage a brutal war. No, let's keep it clean and fast. Come by the office after work. You can sign it. And don't forget the locks." Already scheduled. A guy is coming at noon. All day at work, Maddie couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept drifting back to last night and the impending divorce. Her coworkers noticed her mood but tactfully didn't ask questions. During her lunch break, the locksmith arrived as planned. While he worked on the door, Maddie sat in the kitchen drinking coffee. Every hammer strike, every grinding of metal echoed in her soul. This wasn't just a repair. It was building new boundaries, erecting a new defensive wall around her life. When the technician finished and handed her a new set of keys, she felt immense relief. That evening after work, she stopped by Sylvia's firm, signed the paperwork, and went home. She expected to find Andrew or his mother waiting outside her building, but to her surprise, no one was there. The apartment was quiet and peaceful. She changed into sweatpants, made a light dinner, and put on an old movie. Only now did it really hit her how exhausted she had been living in constant tension, always waiting for an attack, always on high alert. Her phone rang around 10 p.m., unknown number. She hesitated, but ultimately answered. "Hey," Andrew's voice came through the speaker. He was calling from a burner or a friend's phone. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "Maddie, I can't get into the apartment. The key doesn't work." "It's not your apartment anymore, Andrew," she said. "I changed the locks." "What about my stuff?" "Your things are packed in a bag in the hallway. I can put them out by the elevators, or you can swing by tomorrow after I get off work." Silence hung on the other end. Are you serious?" He finally choked out. "You're filing for divorce?" "Yes. In fact, the papers are being mailed to your mother's house, since I assume that's where you're living now." "But why, Maddie? We can talk this out." "I'll talk to Mom. I'll fix everything." "You've said that so many times. I don't believe you, Andrew. Goodbye." She hung up and instantly blocked the number. Tears pricked her eyes again, but she didn't let them fall. Enough. She had cried enough over the last 3 years. It was time to start a new life. The next day, hell broke loose. In the morning, Linda called her work phone. She screamed, threatened, and accused Maddie of every sin in the world. Maddie listened to her tirade in silence, then said calmly, "Linda, if you don't stop threatening me, I will be forced to report this to the Chicago police. I am recording this call." Her mother-in-law went silent for a second, then slammed the phone down. An hour later, Katie called. She started sobbing into the phone, talking about how Maddie had destroyed their family, how she left her brother homeless and penniless, and how she drove her sick mother to the brink of a heart attack. Maddie hung up and blocked her number too. But they wouldn't let it go. That evening, as she was coming home from work, Andrew was staking out the lobby. "We need to talk," he said, blocking her path. "We have nothing to talk about. Direct all your questions to my attorney." "I'm not leaving until you hear me out," he insisted. "Fine," Maddie sighed. "You have 5 minutes." They stood outside the entrance. He talked and talked about his love, about how stupid he had been, about how he was ready to do anything to get her back. He promised he would change, get a full-time job, stop listening to his mother. Maddie looked at him and felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no sympathy, just an icy void. "Are you done?" she asked when he fell silent. He nodded. "All right, now listen to me. Your words mean absolutely nothing. Actions matter, and your actions show that you are a weak, spineless man who will never grow up. You will always choose your mother over your wife, because with your mother, it's easier, more comfortable, and there's zero accountability. With a wife, you have to be a partner. You have to make hard decisions, and you are incapable of that." She stepped around him and reached for the door handle. "Maddie, wait!" he yelled after her. "What about the car? Are you going to give me half the money for it?" She stopped and turned around with pity. "The car?" She smiled wryly. "No, Andrew, I'm not giving you a dime. I paid the loan, I paid the insurance, I paid for maintenance. I consider that minimum compensation for the 3 years I wasted on you and your family. Take me to court. We'll gladly beat you there." With those words, she walked into the building, leaving him alone. She knew he wouldn't go to court to fight for the car. He didn't have the money for a lawyer, nor the evidence. It was over, final and irrevocably. Andrew's family's reaction to Maddie's firm stance was predictable. Unable to break her defenses with pleas or threats, they resorted to guerrilla warfare. Linda started calling all their mutual friends and extended family, spinning a heart-wrenching tale about how her treacherous, calculating daughter-in-law had stripped her poor baby boy of everything and thrown him out on the street. She painted Maddie as a monster, a corporate predator who only married a boy from a regular family to use him. Some people, especially those who already disliked Maddie for her independence, swallowed these revelations. Others preferred to stay out of it. One day, Maddie got a call from her aunt in Ohio. "Maddie." "Hi," she began in a concerned voice. "That mother-in-law of yours, Linda, called me." "Good Lord." The things she was saying. "What is going on over there?" "She said you left Andrew completely destitute." Maddie took a deep breath. "Auntie, please, don't believe a word she says. It's a long, disgusting story. But the short version is, I just stopped being their personal ATM, and they really didn't like that." "Oh, is that it?" Relief flooded her aunt's voice. "I was getting worried. I know you. You wouldn't hurt a fly." But she was wailing, crying into the phone so hard. Playing the martyr is her favorite theatrical genre. Maddie smiled sadly. But the lowest blow came from a completely different direction. A week after their final conversation outside the building, Maddie went down to her parking garage and saw that all 4 tires on her BMW had been slashed. The car sat helplessly on its rims. There were no notes, and the security cameras didn't point directly at that corner. She called the police and filed a vandalism report, but deep down, she knew exactly who was responsible. However, she couldn't prove a thing. She had to drop a pretty penny on new tires and a tow to the tire shop. Andrew, of course, denied everything. When she called and asked him directly, he threw a fit. "You think it was me? You think I'm capable of being that much of a lowlife? How could you even think that?" "Who else, Andrew?" she asked calmly. "Who else loses sleep over my car?" "I don't know. Maybe some jealous people from your job, or an ex." "Why do you always blame me and my family? Because you're the only ones with a motive." She cut him off. She didn't prolong the conversation. She knew he would never confess. He would lie to her face and gaslight her. That's how his mother raised him. The next move in this war was an attack on her professional life. Somehow, Linda got the cell phone number for Maddie's boss, Victor. She called him, introducing herself as a concerned mother-in-law, and started spouting nonsense that Maddie was overworking herself, was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, was taking it out on her family, and suggested that this unstable behavior could damage the reputation of such a prestigious firm. Victor, thankfully, turned out to be a rational man. He listened to these revelations, then called Maddie into his office. "Maddie, is everything all right at home?" he asked, studying her intently. "Your mother-in-law called me. She expressed some concerns." Maddie felt the blood rush to her face. "Victor, I am going through a very difficult divorce," she admitted honestly. "And my husband's mother is, to put it mildly, not thrilled about it. She's trying to pressure me using every means available. I am so sorry this reached you. I understand. Her boss nodded. Family matters. I don't get involved in that. I just want you to know that I have absolutely no issues with you as a professional. You are one of the best directors in this department. Don't worry about it. Keep doing your job and deal with your mother-in-law however you see fit. Thank you so much. She breathed a massive sigh of relief. She walked out of the office feeling a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. Embarrassment that her dirty laundry was being aired in front of management, and gratitude that her boss showed class. But she knew Linda wouldn't stop. The final chord of this psychological warfare was Andrew's unexpected appearance at her door, suitcases in hand, with Mommy Dearest right beside him. Maddie was just coming back from grocery shopping, having just broken in her new tires, when she saw them in her hallway. "We've come to make peace," Linda announced grandly. "Andrew has thought everything through," she added, pushing her son toward Maddie. "He realizes he was wrong. He is ready to beg for your forgiveness on his knees. Right, son?" Andrew, shifting awkwardly, nodded. "Maddie, I really get it now. Let's start over. I can even live away from Mom, if that's what you want. See?" Her mother-in-law beamed. "We'll rent him a little studio right nearby and you can visit him and we'll be a big happy family again." Maddie looked at this cabaret act and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Linda," she said, barely suppressing a mocking smile. "Do you seriously think I'd believe this after everything you've done? He's ready to do anything for me? He's changed?" "He has," Linda insisted. "No, he's ready to do anything for his own convenience. And you're just looking for a new way to control his life and mine?" "I'm sorry, but this circus doesn't stop here anymore. I'm sending the caravan away." She pulled out her keys to unlock her door. "Let us in!" Her mother-in-law suddenly shrieked, trying to shove Maddie aside. "This is my son's home too." "He lived here, but he has absolutely no rights to it," Maddie replied icily. "And now, if you don't leave, I'm calling the cops for harassment and trespassing." She opened the door and tried to shut it behind her, but Linda stuck her foot in the crack. "You'll regret this," she hissed with rage. And then Maddie realized she had to play by their own ruthless rules. She pulled out her cell phone and said loudly, "Hi, 911? Yes, I have unknown individuals trying to force their way into my apartment. They are threatening me." "Yes, the address is." Linda instantly yanked her foot back, looked at Maddie with indescribable fury, grabbed her son by the sleeve, and pulled him toward the elevators. Maddie locked the door, turned all the deadbolts, and leaned her back against the cool wood. Her heart was hammering. She had won this battle, but she felt she needed one final nuclear option to end the war. After that incident, she met Sylvia at a small coffee shop in the Loop. "They won't stop," she said, stirring her cooling latte. "Yesterday, they tried to force their way into my condo. They only backed off when I pretended to call 911. That means we need to deliver a massive preemptive strike," the lawyer stated matter-of-factly, pulling out a notepad. "We have two fronts. The divorce is pending, the court date is soon, but we still have the issue of the harassment and his demands regarding the car. What do you suggest? We need to hit them where it hurts. Let's meet with him and blackmail him with something from his own past. Do you have anything concrete?" Maddie remembered the car crash from last year. "He was drunk when he totaled his last car," she said quietly. "We made a deal with the other driver on the spot. I paid the guy $1,500 in cash from an ATM so he wouldn't call the cops." "Perfect." Sylvia's eyes lit up. "Do you have that documented?" "Unfortunately, no. It was all verbal. But I might have the guy's number. I remember saving it in my old phone." That evening, after turning old boxes upside down, she found her previous iPhone. She charged it up, and by some miracle, it turned on. She found the contact, Thomas, fender bender. She hesitated before hitting the green dial button. It felt stupid dragging a strange man into her private drama. But desperation was stronger. Thomas answered after 2 rings, and surprisingly, he remembered her instantly. "Ah, the lady with the white BMW," he said. "I remember. Your husband was acting real smart at first. Thomas, I know this is an unusual request, but I really need your help. I'm going through a divorce. My husband is trying to take my car in the settlement and is harassing me. If it came down to it, Would you be willing to confirm, maybe in a sworn affidavit or in court, that on that day he was, to put it mildly, not in the best shape? Thomas was silent for a moment. You know what? He wasn't in not the best shape. He was hammered. If it wasn't for you and that cash, he would have lost his license for years. And since he acted like an arrogant prick to me, I will gladly confirm that in front of any institution you want. Call me. You've got an ally. With this ace up her sleeve, Sylvia drafted a brutal pre-litigation demand letter to Andrew. She structured a concise ultimatum. Either Andrew signs a stipulated property settlement agreement relinquishing all rights to the BMW to Maddie without any buyout, while waiving any claims for reimbursement from her separate property. Or they would go to trial, introduce a witness proving he totaled his previous vehicle while driving under the influence. This would not only open the door to civil liability for dissipating marital assets, but also potential reports to his insurance company for fraud. They added the threat of a restraining order for good measure. The response came quickly. 2 days later, Andrew called Maddie himself. The last remnants of his pride and his mother's arrogance had evaporated from his voice. Maddie, I got the letter from your lawyer. Why are you doing this? Why are you digging up old dirt? A DUI on my record means I lose my license. I need to drive to see clients. It's a death sentence. Because you left me no other choice, she answered coldly. I wanted to split amicably. You chose war. Now you accept my terms. It's a negotiation. It's blackmail. When my tires got slashed, did you think about how I was supposed to get to work? When your mother called my boss and accused me of being crazy, did you think about my career? He went silent. You have 24 hours, Andrew. You sign the settlement with my lawyer, and you disappear from my life. Otherwise, we trigger the legal procedures. She knew Linda would be furious, would scream about her being a ruthless bitch. But she also knew they were both cowards when faced with real legal consequences, the police and insurance fraud charges. And that's exactly what happened. A day later, in Sylvia's downtown office, a crushed and pale Andrew signed the settlement agreement without a word of protest. When he looked up from the desk, he muttered quietly, You won. Did you get what you wanted? We both lost our family, Andrew, she replied. But maybe because of that, we get a chance to start over. Separately. 6 months later, autumn settled over Chicago, painting the trees in Lincoln Park in shades of crimson and gold. Maddie sat in her office, signing documents. That presentation from that fateful Friday had been a spectacular success. The firm landed the client, and Maddie got a promotion and the title of vice president. Work had become her anchor in a changed world. Her life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Linda and Katie had completely vanished from her radar. Andrew had given up, and the uncontested divorce was finalized at the very first hearing. She occasionally saw him by chance downtown. He looked worse for wear. Once, she saw him with a new girlfriend. For a split second, it stung, but the feeling quickly faded. She was indifferent. She spent her massive bonus on exactly what she wanted. She didn't go to Italy as she had planned with her ex-husband, but instead, she took her own mother for 2 weeks to a beautiful cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. They rented a place near the woods, hiked the trails, and talked by the fireplace until dawn. You've changed, honey, her mom told her. You're so confident. I just finally became myself, Mom. I stopped trying to squeeze into the mold of other people's expectations. Maddie sold the cursed BMW. It carried too many toxic memories of fights and blackmail. With the trade-in value and some savings, she bought a reliable, brand-new Toyota RAV4 all on her own. Stepping into the spotless interior, she felt that this was her own, hard-earned life. One Saturday, Sylvia called. Hey, workaholic, do you ever rest? Surprisingly, yes. I have the day off today. Awesome, I've got gossip. You won't believe whose eviction case I saw on the docket recently. Your ex-mother-in-law and her lovely daughter took out a bunch of sketchy payday loans for garbage they didn't need. They got caught in the debt trap, couldn't pay it back. The bank foreclosed on the house, and it's going to auction. They're losing the house. Maddie was silent. She looked up at the autumn sky. Do you feel sorry for them? Sylvia asked with surprise. I feel sorry that people don't learn from their own mistakes. They got used to living beyond their means on someone else's dime, and when the well ran dry, they thought they could survive on high-interest loans. A fool will always be a fool. Exactly. And speaking of your day off, I met a really interesting divorced guy. An architect. Maybe we can do a double date for dinner downtown? Everyone pays for themselves. I promise. Maddie laughed genuinely. Why not? She didn't know what the future held, but she was no longer afraid of it. She knew she could handle anything. She had learned the most important lesson life had to offer her. Never, under any circumstances, let others dictate your worth. And never pay for someone else's check, whether in a restaurant or in life.